You are now listening to The Jason Damico Show.
Greetings, folks. Welcome back to The Jason Damico Show. It is so great to be here with you. And we have, as always, an extremely special guest on the show this episode. And special thanks again to our distributors, Simplecast, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify, and all of the great platforms out there. Our guest is a composer and guitarist who's toured in the U.S. and Europe. He's also a nationally recognized radio personality, hosting a daily show on B.B. King's Bluesville and Deep Tracks on Sirius XM. His upcoming album, Zodiac, Griot, will be released on May 3rd, 2024 on Dealer's Choice Records. His recent albums, Hit and Run, The Corner, and Electric City, have all earned positive praise by critics and have produced a string of hits that have received airplay nationally and internationally. And recent collaborations include Bobby Rush, Papa Chubby, Eliza Niels, Dave Keys, as well as sharing concert bills with greats such as Tommy Castro and Eric Gales. He's also currently featured as the lead guitarist on the Misty Blues track Silver Lining, which is receiving airplay in the U.S. and around the world. Please welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, my new friend, Early Times. It's so great to have you.
Jason, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate being here.
It's so great. And just reading your bio and doing some show prep this morning, and shout out to Susan, who works with you. She was incredible. Absolutely. Like one of the best, if not the best, team members, co-managers, whatever her role is on your team. Gave me a call immediately once you got us synced, and she was just such a great person to have conversation with and just kind of talk a little bit of music briefly, and so helpful in just getting all the information over. And out of doing 150 of these thus far, around 150, it was by far the most seamless process. So really, shout out to Susan. Really appreciate her.
Yeah, it's a big help to me too, because I just got my finger in different pies, and it's helpful to have Susan and other people that just have given me a lot of help recently and through the years. But it's something that I appreciate, and it definitely makes things possible for me, because I'd forget things and I'd have all kinds of problems.
Absolutely. And we've got a few mutual friends in Eliza and Eric, and it shows how small but family oriented the blues community is, because everybody's pretty much spread out all over the nation and the world, but the roots run deep.
And I sometimes I feel like I wish I could see everybody more, but as you say, everybody's spread out all over the place. A lot of people are on tour. It's hard to always connect with people. And so we do so with little texts here and there, just checking in to say hi kind of thing. But yeah, I kind of, it'd be nice to see people more. But I'm really grateful for the people that I do kind of run with, in a certain sense, in this circle, in this blues field, and in the music field in general, because I've played other styles of music as well. And, I'm one of those people who kind of just looks at music as one thing, even though I do know the different genres and what creates those sounds and styles. But, ultimately it's all you're just trying to express yourself somehow.
Absolutely. And it shows, and it sounds like there's multiple weavings of just incredible fluidity with all the genres that you put out. And I really look forward to diving into that. But first, I'm gonna start as kind of with your beginning stages. It seems to be, I would say, the most logical place to start from, because I don't know too much about the earlier parts of your career based on my findings, but I do know that from reading origins from the Sacramento, California community, from what I've read, and would love to just kind of hear your beginning stages, growing up in the community, getting into music, and how this whole amazing journey for you started.
Yeah, so I was as a little kid, I really liked sports a lot. I played a lot of sports growing up, but I also enjoyed listening to music. And I had, a stack of the old 45 records that my parents had lying around, and I heard, a lot of like early rock and roll and rhythm and blues stuff, and I remember hearing people like Ray Charles and even Johnny Cash, and just classic kind of American rootsy music. But my parents were never trying to push any of this stuff on me. It just happened to be what they had lying around the house, and I fell into listening to it a little bit. And then when I was about 12 years old, there was something that was kind of calling me to get into music and playing the guitar. And quite frankly, I would have probably played whatever instrument I could have got my hands on at that point. If I had had a drum set, I'd have probably just became a drummer. I think it was more the music than the particular instrument at that time for me. You don't know, you're 12 years old. So, that's a while ago for me to remember the details of like what my thought pattern was. But I was able to get a guitar, an electric guitar, and I got really lucky and just found a great local teacher. He had this ad, and hopefully till the day I die, I'll remember this little ad. It was in this little local newspaper called the Penny Saver. It's like classified ads. And this guy was advertising, I teach rock guitar from Beatles to Van Halen or something like that. And I said, that's who I need teaching me. I didn't have the guy for very long. He had a band of his own called Thin White Rope that went over to Europe and did some decent things. And he couldn't teach me too much longer, but he got me enough of a start that really helped me out quite a bit. And I'll always appreciate that. And then I got lucky when I was a freshman in high school. I had a teacher from the school come up to me and said, I was actually in this guy's class. And he said, "You play guitar, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you any good?" I said, "No, not really. But I love it." He goes, "Well, some of the teachers, we have a band here at the school. We just, do some fun things with, but we have a drummer who's a student here as well. And we lost our guitar teacher who used to be the music teacher here. We don't have it anymore. We're looking for a guitar player." So anyway, long story short, I joined this band doing like classic rock and roll stuff. And it was the stuff that I had 45s of when I was a kid, And so at the age of 14, I got into a band and started playing at dances and parties and little functions and events and was making a few bucks. And as a, 14-year-old kid, that was all right because you couldn't even get a job at that age at that time other than being a paper boy, And those jobs don't even exist anymore, I don't think. So I got it. So that's how I really, the early stages, I got kind of lucky. I got a guitar. I wanted to learn. I got a teacher. And then I happened to get into a band, and it got me not only playing kind of semi-professionally at that age, but also kind of thinking a little bit professionally at an early age, knowing what it means to go and have a job, a gig somewhere, and you've got to play, and you got to have your gear together. And then that just led, through high school. And then I started my own group right after high school and been playing every day pretty much since.
I got to ask you where or what, it could be where or what, or was there a significant moment for you or record or song or band that was like, man, whatever this is, I got to be a part of this? And I've got mine, and I've said mine a few times on this show, so I don't want to be too redundant. If you'd like to hear, I can tell you after yours, but I'm curious to hear what that was for you, if you had a couple of those moments.
I got to tell you, Jason, I had, those happened along the way, and there's no hyperbole or anything. Like, it still happens. I'll still find something new that inspires me, or that I just like, or I just dig, even if it's something that I wouldn't necessarily try to play or want to play myself, I may love what that person's doing anyway. So, early songs, just to peel back the curtain, I guess, a little bit. I used to, and still to this day, think that the song called "Louie Louie" by the Kingsmen. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there was something about that song, the rawness, the recording, the drumming. It sounded like he was like playing the crash cymbal, like it was a ride almost. I don't even know what it was, but there was something about the whole vibe of that song that just appealed to me. And it's very similar. It's a similar feeling to me of when I hear like the Kinks, "You Really Got Me."
Yeah.
That raw garage rock and roll, great riff. And it just has a snarl to it. And, I just love that. And to this day, I still like music that has a little bit of a snarl and a little bit of a swagger. Fan of AC/DC.
Yeah.
Love Bon Scott's style. I love Brian Johnson's style. There was something about those guys. And, and a lot of what I love comes back to musicians playing together in a room at the same time, a band. And so even when I get into enjoying blues and jazz, which I really spent a lot of years, listening to jazz too, and playing, professionally for a while, doing stuff like that as well, is that's all that's why I say music to me is kind of a universal thing, because all of those, a jazz group is similar to a rock and roll group if everybody's playing in the same space at the same time and trying to create a unified energy amongst themselves. And as long as everybody's on the same team, kind of, so to speak, magic can happen. And I will say that I think that that's one of the things, and it was subconscious. I didn't realize it till later, but one thing I think I learned from playing sports as a little kid was the idea of being on a team. And that, like, if you're a basketball team and you got 5 people, you can't really have 5 centers or 5 point guards and be a good team. Everybody kind of has to have a role and know what to do. And I think that somewhere subconsciously that's carried with me into playing in bands. As long as everybody kind of like, get in where you fit in, kind of an idea, find something that you can contribute to that unit and do that really well. And I think that that's something that can make a band really pop. I think all the great bands, most of the greatest bands you can think of, are not necessarily all the greatest virtuosos, but they got together and they had some kind of a magic together that worked. And there might have been a certain person who was a front man or front people who really popped, but those other people in the band, provided the foundation. So all that kind of stuff inspired me musically. Great rock and roll songs. Hearing good jazz guitar. So another part to answer your question, I remember going, as I playing hard rock, and this was been in the 80s, heavy metal was popular. It was about how fast you could play and things like that. And I could get my fingers moving pretty quick at the time, but I went and saw some jazz guitar players playing every bit as fast as me, but playing way more melodically and with no distortion at all, just absolutely crystal clean. And they were just killing it. And I had to give my props and say, okay, all right, you've thrown down the gauntlet. Now I got to go back in the woodshed here, and I'm going to have to learn this now. And I didn't come from that background. I didn't have jazz band at any of the schools I was at, and if there was one, I don't think I'd have probably joined it at the time, But I really dug in. I learned all that stuff, and I think I've been able to filter that into whatever I play, even if I'm playing a rock tune or a blues tune. Sometimes there's certain things I think I can kind of understand that, hey, this chord here is going to sound really cool in this progression. And I learned some of that stuff from jazz harmony for sure.
The jazz philosophy and the voicings and the harmonies and the use of all the melodicism is it's something that I've been really getting into over the last few years, and it changes everything. And because I come from a similar background where, and I'm a drummer first, so I had a lot of hurdles I had to overcome. I had to really get the ears working. For me, I'll just kind of go on a tangent. I just want to throw this into the pot for a second because it's so interesting what you just kind of elaborated on, which is, coming from that more aggressive, kind of gritty sound, the rawness. And for me, it was like SRV was when I heard that type of guitar playing, I didn't even know that was possible. And I was really, in my early teen years, I was drumming and playing professionally and the whole thing. And it was like, I wanted to start writing songs, but I didn't have the melodicism quite under my belt. But when I heard his playing, I was like, I don't know what is going on here, but it sounds like somebody's playing drums and guitar at the same time. Like the sound is massive. It's unbelievable. It's on and at the time I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I just, the note choices, the vibe, the emotion, the swagger. And I just knew it was like, okay, I got to follow this path because I feel like if I can at least get to a certain level of comfort with this and be able to pull it off, nobody can pull it off like Stevie, but it's like at least get in that mindset. From there, if I want to go down a jazz rabbit hole, I'll be able to. If I want to go down a harder rock rabbit hole, because he just had like everything, and it wasn't like he was a virtuoso. He was he was so focused, laser focused on what he was doing. But I heard all those elements, and it's like, so moving from there, it just became, now I've been playing a lot in church and, learning all these different voicings and then having the Eric Gale's influence and knowing him as a friend. It's like the things that these guys do, it becomes this like limitless palette of sound and color, getting outside of the box and experimenting. And I'm really, really stoked for your album that's going to be coming out soon, May 3rd, Zodiac, Griot. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of, how that came to be for you?
I've been working. My group that I normally play with is Early Times on the High Rollers, and
Yes.
and we're kind of known we're known kind of mostly in the blues field, but we definitely widen that spectrum. I like to push the boundaries a little bit. I like listening to a lot of styles of music, and I'm always trying to find something new to kind of just become a muse or just to get into for a minute, But I think that really the key, I think, something that you want to say, and then figure out how you want to say that. And to me, I think that use all these inspirations and find all these people and styles and songs that you love. But ultimately, I think the goal for me anyway is, what do I want to say and how am I going to say it? And I knew musicians when I was growing up, and they would sit and they would learn, somebody's solo note for note constantly. And I never did that. And I never wanted to do it. Even my favorite musicians, I just felt like it just was time taken away from me developing something that I wanted to do as an artistic expression. Yeah. And so to this day, even though I've been a guitar player, almost my whole life, I play quite a few instruments at this point, but guitar is kind of the one I've been married to the longest. And I think that always tried to present myself, though, as just kind of an artist, an artistic person, not like in a pompous way, but the guitar just is a tool, but I could also do things on other instruments, and feel just as fulfilled artistically. So it's not just the guitar that matters to me, but I am impressed with your nice collection behind you there. I'm seeing, quite the collection.
Yeah, there's some fun fretboards here, and speaking of guitars, actually, we'll jump to this and then we'll get back to the record. I read that you've got a signature guitar with Delaney Guitars out of Austin, Texas. Tell us about that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so like Delaney, I was aware of his guitar making and his company because he was making guitars for a lot of kind of the blues rock guitar players that are out there today. for people like Tommy Castro and Mike Zito, and I want to say Albert Castiglia, although I might not be right about that. Joanna Connor for sure. He's just been making for a lot of people that I'm aware of, either know them personally or know their music. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I love what you do on the guitar, and I'd like to build something for you." And so I just said, I told him, I said, "I'm aware of who you are and your work and things, and I'd be honored." I said, "But what I would really like to do is if you'd allow me then to have a hand in designing the guitar itself, so I'm not just playing a Delaney guitar, but that I have some bit of an artistic part in the design of it." And so he was all for it. And I sent him a little really generic, terribly drawn, guitar shape of what I was looking for. And he made it happen. And it's kind of a dream come true, to be involved with that. Because I remember when I was young, like early 20s, and we can get into the, getting back to the Sacramento scene that I grew up in.
Sure.
But, I remember musicians that I knew would get like a deal with some string company or some company. And I was always amazed by that. Like, how do you get a deal like as an endorsed artist or whatever, and it turned out, that some of them would just write the company and say, "Hey, I play, X amount of nights a week. I love your stuff," and they'd become an endorser, but I'm really proud to work with Mike Delaney. And in the sense that he works with me, he's interested in what, his artists that he works with, what they want. He wants us to play stuff that we love. And he also, he makes his stuff there in Texas, and I feel good about, supporting American small business. I think that's great. And so it's been a real nice partnership with him. And my guitar, I've got 3 different ones that he's made for me, and they're very similar, but they're all slightly different. So we kind of keep tweaking them as well. But I play every day. If I don't play guitar every day, I'm playing something every day, some instrument. I look at music as work, as a job, and I try to put in the time that I think it requires. The one thing about me, man, when I was growing up, nobody ever had to ask me to practice. I was way ahead of them. I was hungry, man, and I still remain that to this day. And I feel like I know the guitar. I feel like I've got it, but that doesn't mean I can't get more. And a lot of times, and if you've been playing for long enough, this. A lot of times, the things that you end up working on further down the road you get are the most minuscule things that nobody would even pick up on that you did, or that you worked on, or that you cleaned up. But the audiences will feel it. They'll know that you've got it. They won't know what it is or why, but there's something usually that gets passed along that way. And that's what, and as when I've taught in the past, that's what I always tell my students. As you go further along, you'll be working on the most minor little things that you just want to clean up. You just want to touch this part of your playing up. A lot of times that means learning what notes not to play.
Ooh. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I spent probably a good 8 or 10 years really grinding on, and like you were saying, speed, working those chops, getting it blistering fast and clean, and being able to do it with some light distortion or full blown overdrive and all these different sounds. And at the end of the day, you're right. It really comes down to, what do you want? What message do you want to get across? And is it really you trying to put it through this filter of ego, or is it really from the heart? So for the last few years now, for me, it's been exactly what you said. It's like, wow, those notes are detracting from the message. It's actually cluttering it up. Or you just change those 2 notes in that one run, and it changes the whole tone and the whole timbre and the mood. And it's like, so that's it. Now it's turning into more of that. And it's like you said, everything really comes down to staying in that hungry mindset and being teachable and learning from your likes and your dislikes. You can learn as much from your dislikes as you can learn from your likes. So it's really great seeing someone like yourself who's been really prominent on the scene for quite some time with all of this in so many different hands and so many different things successfully, and to still just have that hungry mindset. It's really it's great.
There's a part of me, man, that always kind of fears that just like one day I'll wake up and like the carpet will have been pulled out from under me for whatever reason. I won't get to do it, and that's part of probably the hunger. Like I don't take anything for granted, and I really and the different work that I do too, I feel like there's a certain responsibility with some of it, and for example, in broadcasting, I mean, I feel like I'm holding a platter of very precious things, these songs, these artists, these stories and histories about the music, and blues is rich in them, as are other styles. But I try to always remember that I have a responsibility to try to bring some enjoyment through this music, some maybe a little historical perspective, and knowledge and appreciation of it. And I'm always trying to, I don't really have to try to remind myself, I guess. I think I just naturally, know that things can be there one day and not be there the next. And I want to do the best I can while I'm doing it. And that's true too with, when I make an album or go on stage to play, or as I say, in broadcasting, it's all it's a privilege to do all of it. And I think any job that you want to do in life, whatever that is, artistically or otherwise, athletes are the same way. You play this sport or that sport for years and years before you're ever going to see any money doing it, maybe becoming professional, but you did it all those years anyway. And that's why you got to that level, and it takes a lot of luck. It takes, you meet somebody who sees something in you. I remember seeing an interview years ago with this broadcaster Ed Bradley interviewing Bob Dylan. And in the interview, Dylan mentions a few times, he mentions the word just destiny, like, how does this happen? How did you write these songs? Those kind of questions. And Dylan just kind of kept going back to this, there's just like this destiny. And Ed Bradley finally asked him, like, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, it's like when you know something about yourself that even if nobody else around you sees, like, you know it yourself, you're going to make this happen. And I found it really like a fascinating answer, and I think that it's kind of like self-manifestation sometimes. You work hard, you don't always know where the end game is, but sometimes you get lucky and somebody comes along and finds you and said, you're the guy I'm looking for.
It's like JP Morgan says, go as far as you can see, and then when you get there, you can see further.
Well, you know what? And that kind of leads back to your question earlier about like certain touchstone songs or artists you hear that inspire you, make you want to go further. Well, you do the same thing. And for example, as a musician, when you're first playing, you think, oh, the first time I could ever like perform in front of anybody, like that would be the ultimate. And then you do it. And then your next goal is, okay, well, if I could ever get into like a recording studio and make a recording, and you just keep adding to those things, and then all the while, for everybody that's going to come along and maybe see something in you and want to help you out or point you in the right direction, there's going to be all those people that are going to not do that for you, and so there's that. You gotta kind of fight through that, and that's hard because for a lot of us who are artistic, we want to have certain acceptance, we hope for it, and sometimes there's just, you're going to run into people who are going to want to stand in your way.
I've got a plaque on my wall over here. I got it from Amazon. It says persistence. It's just white and it's just got black font, persistence in big black font. It's hard work rising from failure, achieving success through trial and error. the ability to keep pushing through obstacles without giving up. So every morning, no matter what it is, if it's, booking gigs, if it's working on music, being on film sets, auditioning, my God, the auditioning process, So, and really it goes back to you got to enjoy the ride. And when I was in my early 20s and my teen years, like it would be, I'd go like this. It was like the most irritating thing to hear everybody senior to me saying, enjoy the journey, enjoy the journey. And I'm just like death gripping everything that I'm doing, trying to go 120 miles an hour and just like make it happen. But you gotta enjoy the ride. So, and you have been on so many different fronts, and you brought up broadcasting. I definitely want to talk about that for a moment. See how that came about. Sirius XM. That's how I actually discovered you. My mom is a big fan of your show, or what first she was, and then got me turned on to it. We started tuning in when we were driving around and everything. From time to time, we were in the same vehicle, and how did this happen? Tell us a little bit about the Bluesville story.
Well, growing up as a kid and having all these old records and stuff, one of the things that I used to do, and I again, I didn't know I was preparing myself for what might end up being a career one day, but I loved looking at the little records and the labels, and I can remember the colors and what labels looked like what. And sometimes I would find out, what year they were recorded, or it would say who wrote the song, or, and I would memorize that stuff, not even consciously, but I was into that kind of stuff. Anyway, years later, I moved to New York City. I didn't know anybody in New York, but I wanted to go where I believed the best of the best were. I wanted to see if I could, cut the mustard, with where the real cats were, and I'm not saying that everybody's in New York, but there's definitely a concentrated thing that, in New York City. And I took a job when I got there, at a record store on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And it was, they had a jazz and blues department in the basement, and I got hired there full time to work in that department. And some really cool people used to come in and shop with me. I remember Walter Becker of Steely Dan used to come in occasionally, and John Lewis, who's a famous jazz piano player for the Modern Jazz Quartet. And just different people would come in, and then they'd, because I'm behind the counter, they'd ask me about product, a cool jazz album or a cool blues album or whatever. And I worked with a guy who at the time said, I'm kind of between radio jobs, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I didn't really think anything of it. Months go by, maybe a year goes by, I don't even remember. And he gives me a call and says, let me backtrack. While I was working there, a couple albums that I did with a blues singer named E.C. Scott came out. They were on a label called Blind Pig Records, which was one of the good blues labels at the time. And so this guy that I was working with knew that I knew the history of blues and jazz music because I worked in this store and I was able to talk with the customers and suggest things and whatnot. But he also knew I was kind of part of the current blues scene. I was touring and I was making records with some of these artists. So he calls me up one day and says, I'm working on this new thing, this new technology and radio, and I'm going to be involved in a blues channel, and I think you would be really good on the air. What are the odds, man? Really, what are the odds that you have to, and it was a crap job. It was a job that didn't pay, like minimum wage, but I went in there every day and did my job like I felt like I should do it, and there was somebody there who saw that in me. And when he had the chance to get something going, he thought that I could bring something to the table of what he was doing. And so anyway, here's the longer story. So this was probably in around probably around the year 2000, give or take.
Wow.
Then like a year, and in fact, I think, as I recall, I think I even may have gone in and seen what they were. No, I didn't. I take that back. He just, I think he had gotten hired there and he was trying to build a team. But a year goes by, I heard nothing. I thought, well, that sounded like a great idea. Too bad that didn't happen. Then I got a call and came in for an interview. They hired me and I started about a week before 9/11. This is in Manhattan. Okay, so it was a weird next week that was going to be coming, but I started about a week early. The thing is, and this was for Sirius satellite radio. Then there was a company called XM. Now they're a merged company, Sirius XM, as you probably know. So I got brought in, and I was doing my shows starting from September of that year, but we didn't even officially go on the air. We didn't even have like radios on the market till the following, I don't know, it was May, June, July, something like that. So there was about 6 months, the point is, that I was doing a radio show to no listeners. And the reason is because they wanted those of us that came in early on. And some of these people were really big name people. You know, I was more of kind of the guy who just, I was in a niche, you know, I knew that niche of blues, you know. Yeah. But I remember all kinds of people coming through there in the early days, you know, people that I'd, you know, known who they were my whole life. Anyway, then we finally went on the air in 2002 and then it started to pick up steam. And that's kind of, you know, what I thought might happen with it. And that's what happened with it.
So 20 plus years.
Yeah, it was that long ago. Now, there was a few years where I was off the air. When the merger happened, a lot of people got laid off, and I was one of those people. So there was a time there after the merger where I got laid off, and then I got a call one day. I didn't take the call. I just, you know, sent it to voicemail because I didn't know who it was from, and it was the radio station, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming back and being on the air, and so. That was back around 2016, I think. I came back on the air with them, and I've been doing that ever since. And, you know, one thing I will say, aside from me or anything that I do on the radio or anything, I feel like it's been a real honor to be in among colleagues that I have really liked and respected. And a lot of these people that are kind of, especially on the East Coast, New York legends in radio that I've had a chance to either work for or work with. I didn't know them growing up from Northern California. So in a way that might've been kind of good because I wasn't like totally in awe at the time, you know, but I have to say that it's been a real honor to work with, you know, so many of the people that you hear on the radio, and to find that really they're like, I've never really encountered a whole lot of like over ego or anything like that. You know, I've come across pretty much a lot of like really cool people that I think we all love what we do, and you know, are kind of all carry that responsibility to do a good job. So,
well, it's a great channel and great show, and we really appreciate everything that you do for the blues community. And it's like I said, it's a smaller, it's definitely more niche based, but the roots are deep and wide. And it's amazing how it's like a family. It really is. Like the whole blues community feels like a family, even if you only met somebody once, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or longer, and then you run into them, or you end up doing a bill with them or collaborating with them on a couple of things. Everybody's just, for the most part, really super nice. So it's a great community to be a part of, and we're blessed to have you as one of the staples in it.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. The stories are so rich. I mean, you know, if you take the time to research and read and learn the history of the musicians and their environments and however they got, you know, because just like you're asking me about kind of how did I get into playing music and or broadcasting, like I've always found like biographies and autobiographies of a lot of these people really interesting. I wanted to learn, like, how did they get where they were? Like, how did Buddy Guy get to be Buddy Guy? You know, BB King, Howlin' Wolf, you know, these people. And I mean, it's there's an incredible wealth of stories and information out there. And these guys were also definitely, even if it was not overt, there was always some political underpinnings to the early guys, that they were trying to tell their story, and sometimes they had to tell it in ways that were a little bit kind of you know, you know, not directly, because they might have gotten in trouble for speaking their mind too directly. And they found creative ways sometimes to get the same points across that they were trying to make. And as you probably know at this point from getting into the music and stuff, is that I mean, you hear the blues at the heart of jazz. You hear it at the heart of rock and roll. You hear it at the heart of funk. You even hear it in gospel music, you know. Absolutely. And they all end up influencing each other. There's an ebb and a flow that goes there, because a lot of people don't realize, even a lot of the early blues guys, when nighttime came, a lot of times the only thing on the radio was the Grand Ole Opry, and these guys definitely heard what was going on like in the country field, you know. And there's a story where Howlin' Wolf, I want to say he was at Sun Studios in Memphis. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's where he was. But on the same day, there was like I think some country band or artist was recording before or after he was. And, you know, the story was that the guitar player's like, hey, man, I really like the way you sing. And, you know, Wolf's like, hey, man, I really like the way you play guitar. So even though they were like in these kind of from the opposite side of the tracks on some ways, maybe socially, maybe not, but maybe some of them, musicians seem to always make those bridges. Not always, but a lot of times they do. You know, they like good talent, and they like something that moves them. You know, Ray Charles, you know, always loved those old country songs because he thought the stories were great, and that's why he recorded so many of those tunes. You know, and then he put his own thing into it. And that's, you know, and then then he transcended both, you know, country as well as R&B and blues and rock, you know, and created something kind of new. And I guess that's, in his case, that's what they called soul music.
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of, you know, multi-genres and kind of coming from different camps, your discography, I want to go back to that because we kind of got lost a little bit with the technicality there that folks won't see, because I'll edit it out in post. So again, Zodiac Griot, new album coming out May 3rd of this year, 2024, and I heard a little bit of a teaser that Susan sent through YouTube. And I'm stoked. I am so excited for this to be coming out. And it's just great trio jazz. I wrote down a few words here that just really came to mind, in that it's really like a minute teaser of you guys in the studio. And what came to mind was tasty, solid, smooth, exceptional, masterful, and flowing. That was kind of the vibe that I got. And I want to plug a few of your other names that are involved with this. And forgive me, correct me if I'm mispronouncing this. Adam Nussbaum on drums.
Nussbaum or Nussbaum. I say Nussbaum, but I might even be saying it wrong. I'll tell you a little bit about him real quick. You know, he is he's an exceptional drummer, primarily known in the jazz world. Now, he, like a lot of musicians, can play whatever you want to give him pretty much, but he's been known as a jazz player. And, you know, some of the guitar players that he worked with were like John Scofield, John Abercrombie, guys that that are really like those guys, you know what I mean? The top names. And he's worked with so many people. But then I came to find out that I didn't realize originally is that there was an arranger, a jazz arranger by the name of Gil Evans, who had come to prominence working with Miles Davis and arranging for a lot of Miles's albums. But Gil was a big fan of Jimi Hendrix in the late 60s and into the 70s, and he started doing big band arrangements of Jimi Hendrix tunes that were really cool. And I come to find out that there's these two albums, Live at Sweet Basil, that came out probably in the 80s that I had, And Nussbaum was the drummer on those. I didn't even know it at the time when I hired him. I later, kind of probably doing some of my own research or whatever. But yeah, he's kind of the other guy on the session. The organ player, Hammond organ player, is Adam Scone.
Adam Scone.
Yeah, so I met Adam when I first moved to New York City, and I think I moved to New York in 1998 from California. He and I played together a little bit, and I loved what he was doing. But he was already more established than I was in the city, and he had the chance to go out and do a lot of other things. And he ended up touring with the Lincoln Center as a jazz ambassador, and also the Kennedy Center, and then he worked with Daptone Records, playing with some of their artists, and then also releasing his own stuff. So anyway, I kind of always wanted to reconnect with Adam. We stayed in loose contact through the years. Sometimes I might call him if I had a question about, I need to fix something on my Hammond organ, and what do you know anybody, that kind of stuff. Sure. So just, kind of loose, we keep in touch. But when I wanted to do this album, he was the guy that I just thought would be fun to do it with. I thought, here we are, this is 25 years later or something. He's still out there doing it. I know he plays his tail off. So, let me see if he's interested. He was. Then I had to figure out, okay, who would the drummer be? And I'd only played with Adam Nussbaum one time, and it was about one night, maybe 2 nights before COVID shut everything down in New York City. But I did this one gig with Adam, and he came to my mind when I needed a drummer for this session, somebody that could swing, but could play some various styles, would understand how to play a bossa nova, would understand how to play a calypso type of groove. And he ended up being great for the session too, because I was very serious at the session. I mean, when I'm in the recording studio, I'm kind of serious anyway, but I was overly intense that day because I know, but I'll tell you why. There was some reasons though. One, I got sick the day before, so I sounded I sounded like a frog when I was trying to talk. I didn't feel horrible, but I knew I was coming down with something, and I was like this, Yeah. And so I had that going on. Then it's your own music, you're playing, and I'll tell you behind the scenes that we never even played together as a trio before. We walked into the studio that day and recorded an entire album in a 6-hour session.
Wow.
So we got down to work, But Adam Nussbaum, the drummer, was great because he's one of these guys who's always pulling a joke out of his pocket every 5 minutes or more. And so he kind of helped lighten, where I felt like I was kind of a little heavy in the room. He was the opposite of that, and then it goes back again to when you're playing with a group of guys, everybody has a role to take,
the team.
And on that day, I felt like I appreciated that he was kind of just so loose and a lot of jokes and stuff like that. I couldn't have been more happy with the session, man. I just think it, and I thank you for the way you were describing some of it. What I tried to do as the guitar player on it was make an album that, that featured my guitar playing, but nothing flashy though. So instead of plugging into an amp with, overdrive and distortion and the tube screamer pedal and all that, I just plugged right into the board through this little tube preamp with no distortion, no anything, just straight into the board. And, because, if you've got a good guitar and if you play it well, that's not going to work for every situation. Obviously, you can't make a metal tune like that. But for something like what I was doing, where I'm just trying to play lyrically and melodically and really dig into these chord structures, to me, it was a great way to do it. And so we all sat in the same room together. We had for those of your listeners who don't know about the Hammond organ, and particularly the Leslie speaker, the Hammond B3 is a certain model of organ that has a certain sound that is used in all kinds of musics. It's just like the sound, the cool organ sound, not like the pipe church organ sound, but like the cool, funky, greasy organ sound. And part of that sound is having a rotating speaker. called a Leslie, and it throws the sound around the room and creates like the Doppler effect. And and you can have it going slow or fast, and it's just a cool sound. So we put that speaker cabinet into its own room. I just went into a board. So we sat in the room with headphones, and, the only thing you could hear in the room is the drums. And I just was just really happy with it. And part of my nervousness about the session was, am I good enough? Am I good enough to work with Adam Nussbaum, who plays with John Scofield, because again, for your listeners who don't know Scofield, like he's one of like the guitar cats in the jazz world. He's like as big as anybody that plays guitar in jazz, And so, and I don't necessarily feel inadequate, and I feel strong enough to put myself in the position to give it a shot, but you never know until you do it. You can get there and if you're playing live like that and you hit a couple clunker notes, you got to start the whole song again, and the energy can just get sucked out of the room, and you don't want, Adam Scone and Adam Nussbaum giving you the stink eye, like, hey man, you just blew that tape, So I worked my tail off, man, just making sure that I was ready on that day, because there's a lot of improvisation that goes on there.
Yeah.
And improvisation is not just doing something you've never done before, but a lot of times it's things you've done so many times before that you can just pull it out of your hat at the drop of a dime and go with it, and but it takes it's a lifetime of learning, really, man. So that's kind of how that album came around. It was all recorded live. My friend Jay Messina did the mixing on it. He's very well known for his work with Aerosmith, primarily. He did all their big records, in the 70s anyway. So Walk This Way and Sweet Emotion and all that stuff. Wow. He mixed that stuff, and it's still, you listen to Walk This Way or Sweet Emotion to this day, you hear it on the radio, it sounds great. The
Absolutely.
drums sound great.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did the Kiss Destroyer album, with songs like Detroit Rock City. He did the Cheap Trick at Budokan album that you still hear, I Want You to Want Me, on the radio all the time, So he's been a great friend and, kind of colleague, and also kind of a mentor to me since I moved to New York. Another guy, I just got lucky and met him, and kind of kept a loose connection with him, never asked him for a thing, until one day I finally had something that was kind of professional. I said, hey, I'd like to work with you finally. And then our friendship even became deeper. And now, pretty much if I'm working on something, he's somehow involved and that's a treat. He's a funny guy as well.
That's great. And also Chris Sullett, I think, engineered a couple of Grammys under his belt.
Yeah. And that came about, here's another little thing about me and the way that even if I'm like the band leader, quote unquote, if I'm working with musicians, it's because I want to work with those musicians. And so I welcome their ideas. I'll try to come as prepared as I can. But if somebody says, hey, maybe we should do this instead, I'm like all ears. I think that's part of the fun, and that's oftentimes going to make something better,
Yeah.
And so, so when I was looking for a studio to use, it was actually the drummer Adam Nussbaum that said, well, there's this, studio, and this guy, Chris, who I've worked at his place in the past, and he's really good. And I think he'd get a good drum sound, and, and he's got the Hammond B3 there already. And I'll tell you another nice thing about Chris as a recording engineer is that you kind of didn't even know he was there in some ways, which is kind of what you want, because you've got so many things going on, from song to song, and just making sure everybody's on the same page. And, he would come in and, but even he made a suggestion to me. I brought a whole lot of guitars, just like you got behind you there. I thought, well, maybe every song I'll use a different guitar just to give a little creative variety. If I played one on one song, I did the next song with a different guitar. And as he was coming through the room doing this, moving a mic or whatever, he said, hey, that guitar sounds really great, I was like, okay, I'm rolling with this the rest of the session then, just that little bit, but I appreciated he wasn't even suggesting anything. He was just complimenting the way that it sounded.
He just made a comment. Yeah.
Just off the cuff.
Yeah.
But it was enough for me to think, yeah, let's ride with that, ride or die with this guitar here, and it wasn't like my most expensive guitar or my fanciest or anything. It was just, I thought, if an engineer walks by you and said, that sounds good, why not just roll like that? So yeah, it was a small group of people in whole that put together that record. There was three musicians, an engineer, and a mixer slash master person, um, and I thought we made a pretty big noise for just three guys in a room together.
I'll say this, and I don't know what your personal goals are and whatnot, but I'll say it for the record before it comes out. I would not be surprised if you're going to have some tour dates under your belt for supporting this once people once people hear this, because it's just so good. I've only heard the single Sanctified, and I've only heard like one other minute of just like a quick mashup reel, and I'm excited. So I'm really excited for you, excited for the team, and really want to see this do great things. And regardless, it is exceptional. So definitely be proud of it for sure.
Another nice thing too about that, doing a session like that, and that was a 3-piece session. You could have a larger group too. It starts to get a little trickier, but you really, when you're in that kind of an environment, something that, and I would encourage a lot of musicians, if they don't do this enough already, like when you're recording, because it's so easy these days to record one thing and then record another over it and then another. But I think that one thing you'll never get you'll get a lot of good things doing that, but you'll never get like that mojo of people at the same time feeding off each other. And so I bring that up because, when you're working like the three of us, we're, kind of in a circle playing there. And there's, I've got some videos of the performances. In fact, Sanctified, you can see on my YouTube channel. But it's really about listening to each other and in a kind of a more cerebral way or a parallel sense. You kind of, it's almost the same way like you'd be sitting around a card table playing cards together and just shooting the bull with each other. Right. It's when you're playing, you're listening to each other, you're feeding, you hear the drummer do this little riff there, and you might then repeat that, or take that somewhere. And, there's, I don't know, I really like that personal part of it. And I'm kind of, in a lot of ways, it's funny because I'm not antisocial, but I mean, I'm not really hanging out like all that often, but I cherish those times of playing with musicians and just kind of looking at each other and just kind of vibing. And when that it's swinging, or if it's a funk thing, you just know that like everybody's right in the pocket together. Man, it's it just moves you, and music is physical. It really is. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but it is sound waves. There are waves of sound, and they hit you in different ways. And waves are at the heart of a lot of things. And so I think that it's spiritual and physical and intellectual. It's all those things. And to me, it just gets me charged up, man.
My friend Tony Holiday, I've known him for a really long time. He's known me since I was freaking 18, 17. He always told me that it's a conversation. He's like, come on in the kitchen, Jay. Let's have a conversation. He's always telling me that. It's like, whenever you're on stage, whenever you're playing, it's like, it really is like that. It's everybody just sitting around, gathering, and it's not just somebody spurting off all this stuff. I mean, sure, there's a place for that, but when you're gelling and you're collaborating and that vibe, that mojo that you're talking about, there's nothing like that. And just in the moment and just being in the moment, just being there.
You almost want to get to the point where you're almost in like a trance-like state, where you're just you can kind of turn things on autopilot in a way. You can't do it fully, because you don't want to disengage from the moment there. And if somebody, triggers something else, but you do want to get into that kind of that like Jim Morrison said, there's reality and there's like, unreality, and in between are the doors. You want to be the doors. You want to be the twilight zone. You want to have that feeling where you're letting yourself go to the music, but you also still have to be a participant in what's happening. So man, it's all that stuff. And every year that goes by, I feel like I learn a little something more. And again, it's a lot of times it's those things that you don't learn in a book, man. You don't,
Yeah.
you learn it from experience. And sometimes you play with, a musician who kicks your butt, and they might be a little hardcore, and they might, give you rough looks and stuff, but you learn something from it. I don't like working too much in those kind of environments where people can kind of belittle somebody else or anything like that. But I definitely had my moments where I was, kind of put in check on a certain level. I remember, for example, I played a jazz gig back when I was, I don't know, maybe 21 years old or something. And I was playing my little jazz chords, and, somebody, probably a saxophone solo going on or something. And the bass player slides up to me during the song and said, hey man, there's only one fucking bass player in this band. Well, he was telling me, like, stay out of my register, man.
Stay out
like,
of the range.
Your voicings, your voicings are too low. They're down in my area. Stay away, And the thing was, this guy wasn't trying to be a hard ass. He was kind of being a smart ass a little bit. But I learned his point, and that's another thing that goes with all of this, from broadcasting to playing music to whatever, is if somebody gives you some advice, like, really think about it, and if there's some sense to it, like, incorporate it immediately into what it is that you do, or to take out of whatever it is that you're doing, because people are giving you some knowledge. They're like, hey, check this out here, and if they see you the next time and you didn't heed that advice or take it or learn from it, they're going to look at you a little differently. They're going to be a little disappointed, But if they see that you picked it up and ran with it and got it, then they may give you a little bit more knowledge, next time. So
that's great. That's great. Well, as we kind of round out here towards the end, I had a couple of things I wanted to hit. But we hit pretty much all of the points here. I want to ask you, with your touring, just briefly, any quick stories that usually anybody who's an artist and's been touring for a while ask, any great moment that comes to mind, and then the antithesis of that, of just like one of the most unbearable, Murphy's Law type of instances, and just the contrasting between the two, because it's always fun to hear kind of the touring glorious moments and the war battle scar moments.
I wish I had thought about this a little bit, and I would have probably had a ton of stories. I did do a lot of touring in the 90s, especially. The 90s was a decade that I was on the road quite a bit. It wasn't like a mind-blowing thing, but I do remember the first time that I played Buddy Guy's club in Chicago, and he was there, and I started talking to him in the parking lot, and I just, the moment wasn't lost on me. I thought, damn, I'm in Chicago playing at Buddy Guy's club, and he's going to be here listening to me play. Like, that was just like a cool kind of a thing. Another moment, I remember playing a show. I had an organ trio, like the one that I've got on this new album, out in California, and the most famous of all Hammond organ players was a guy named Jimmy Smith. They called him the Incredible Jimmy Smith, and he was the godfather of the Hammond organ. Anybody that plays blues, jazz, funk, soul, anything after Jimmy Smith, he's the touchstone. He's the guy that you listen to and learn from. And I remember he came into one of my shows, and I was probably, 22 years old or something like that at the time. And I was not a great jazz musician, but, I could swing when I played, but I wasn't, as I said, I didn't grow up playing a jazz band kind of thing. But this organ trio was doing that kind of music. So anyway, it was pretty cool that he came in. He didn't sit in with the band that night, but on two subsequent occasions, he came and sat in with the band the whole night. And the organ player that I had played some other instruments, so he just picked up a guitar or a bass or flute or whatever he was playing that night. But playing with the best of the best was, one thing that, like I said, like that didn't get lost on me either. Like when you're in the presence of somebody who's the acknowledged best in the world,
Yeah.
It's pretty awe-inspiring. It's intimidating. You don't want to embarrass yourself. But if you've got enough fortitude and enough belief in what you're doing, then you should be able to put out, right with those guys, But that was a real treat to do that. And to have him play for really a couple different nights with us. And I don't know, this isn't really a touring thing, so it kind of strays from your question a little bit, but I did record a song with Bobby Rush about 2 years ago, and Bobby just won his third Grammy Award. He's now 90 years old. He's still on the road, still touring. And he saw me perform in New York City. Actually, I was on the same bill that he was on. It was a show that he was the headliner at the City Winery in Manhattan. And I was going on right before him with my group. And he came up to me after the show and said, I really want to write something with you and record something with you. He said, you and I, and he had been on my radio show in the past. So we had met. That was the first time we met. But he said, you and I bring people together at a time when everybody is really apart. And he said, I want to write something with you and record it. The two of us together, man. I said, hell yeah, let's do it. Well, Jimmy lives in down around, I think, Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm in New York City. He's on the road constantly. We could never get in a room together and actually write. So long story short, I wrote this tune called Good Soul Music, and I called Bobby and said, Bobby, I got the tune. I know we want to write something together, and I want to. But I think when you hear this song, it's going to send the message that you wanted to try to send in a song. He heard it, loved it. We recorded it, and it got a lot of radio play. And that was a treat. And to see him get his third Grammy Award, recently. And he's really pretty much just about the oldest guy out there who's been playing since the 1950s, who's still an active blues musician. And it was an honor to work with him and to be asked to work with him, and I tried to hopefully uphold my end of the bargain by coming with a good song and doing a good performance as well.
That's incredible. That's just what a great experience, and
bad performances along the way. There's too many to list, and they're all like for the basic reasons,
Sure.
They're all for the basic reasons, you're not prepared, your equipment's breaking on you, you're late, you don't like the sound, it's like that kind of stuff that's kind of mundane, but one thing that I'm kind of proud of, and I don't know why, and I'm sure the day will come soon, but of all of my years of playing music live, professionally, wherever, clubs, parties, wherever, I've never experienced getting booed at a show. And I don't know. I'm just lucky. I don't know. But, like I say, I know it'll come, it's like, when is it? It must be here, a couple hours from now. But I've kind of always felt like, wow, because that would be, you talk about breaking somebody's spirit, and I know you were talking about being a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. When he would go out and do shows, sometimes he would get booed off the stage.
Yeah,
I remember he came through Northern California. He opened up, I think, for Sammy Hagar. I wasn't at the show, but I heard the crowd was just not feeling Stevie Ray Vaughan. That would have probably been, I'm guessing, in mid 1980s or so. Before
I know it happened at Montreux the first time he was there. It was right before Texas
saw him.
Right before Texas Flood came out, because half the audience loved him. And the other half, you can audibly hear on that, and you can pull it up on YouTube. They're booing, and in any of the books that I've read or biographies on him, and even in interviews, like they talk about that being, and I think that was the night or in the same week of the story that David Bowie met him in Europe. And then everything happened with getting him set up with Jackson Browne, right? I think it was Jackson Browne's studio.
Yeah, well, actually, so Jackson and Bowie were both at that performance together.
Okay.
And Jackson offered the use of his studio that became the Texas Flood album, and Bowie hired him to do Let's Dance, that became a huge comeback album for Bowie.
Right.
Which is, what, again, you can't make these stories are crazy, man.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who goes to Europe. He's hoping for his big break, and he's got people booing him in the crowd. I think he canceled the rest of his whole European tour he was going to do while he was over there. I think it got all just canceled. And I don't know if it was because he got booed, but whatever happened, it was just a total shit show. Excuse my French. But then, what are the odds then that David Bowie hires you to make this one of the biggest albums of the decade, and Jackson Browne gives you use of his studio, and then not only like he got the use of the studio, but you've got those people behind you telling their friends, you got to check out this person and that person.
Yeah.
I mean, and this should be your next poster after your Perseverance one, is the one about luck equals preparation and opportunity.
Yeah.
Luck is preparation meets opportunity.
When I was growing up, I heard it as when skill meets opportunity. I've recently heard the preparation meets opportunity. Either way, that's really what it comes down to.
I've always believed, skill. Skill is something I guess I could understand. I've never really understood fully the term talent, because while I think some people might have a certain predisposition to do something a little better, a little faster, I think I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Aretha Franklin, the singer. You had to put in a lot of time learning to sing like that,
Yeah.
So no matter how much talent there was there, without the time, skill, I guess, is what you develop with time, too, so, but yeah, all those kind of like little anecdotes are great, man, because they do remind us, and, I just hope to, I just try to do a good job and bring a good spirit. And when I'm on the radio every day, I just think, I hope that I bring just a little bit of, lightness to somebody's day and play them hopefully some music that they're going to dig. And if I could do that, I feel like I've done something positive for the day and with my life, And so same when I walk on stage or make an album.
Absolutely. And, moving towards the end here, future plans for you, which, you could project out as far as you'd like, but just kind of what, as you were saying before we were on recording, got a lot on the boiler, a lot on the stove. What can we expect from you beyond the new record and what you currently are doing with all the great broadcasting on XM?
So what I've got going on is this album is coming out. I'm booking some shows around it now. I've got a couple things in California I'm going to do. I'm going to be in New York, upstate New York, and some various other things in Jersey. I've got a show coming up in.
That's great.
But I'm also trying to get a new album out with my band, the High Rollers, which is kind of a little bit more traditional. Most of the songs are I sing and things like that. The Zodiac Griot album is instrumental. But I've been very hard on myself. I kind of feel like I've been really happy with my last couple records, and as a result, I don't want to just like ride on that and put out something that's okay, And I always like when you hear like somebody describe an album and they say it's all killer and no filler. That's what I try to do.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
That's
hopefully
good.
None of my songs are just filler. You never know when exactly to put the pen down, metaphorically speaking.
Sure.
But I'm very close to having those songs ready. And there's a chance I could get something out with that group by the end of the year. As long as I start to move a little quickly, but I just want to make sure I make a good, an album that not only I'll feel good about right now, but I'll feel good about 5 years from now as well. And that's about as far into the future as I get. I just want to, just like with this album that I just did, this instrumental thing, it was something that just something in me said, hey, now's the time to do that record, and so I'm glad I did, and here I am talking to you about it, so it's a good thing.
Fantastic. Well, I like doing one little quick fun thing before we wrap things up, and I call it kind of the shootout or the popcorn question and answer. So I'll just say one word that is related to the guest, and you'll just fire the first word that comes back, or that
so
comes to mind.
One word. You want one word answer? That's
if it's 2 or 3, that's all right.
Okay.
But
All right.
just like one,
all right.
and see what happens. So, guitar.
Stuck with that.
Blues.
Cool.
Jazz.
Also cool.
Song.
Story.
Love it. Studio.
Live.
Stage.
Pleasure.
That's good. Radio. Microphone. Say it again. I don't think it picked up.
Ribbon.
Touring.
Oh.
And the last but not least, pizza.
Oh no.
Let's go. I love it.
I just made myself a pizza for lunch earlier.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Any specific toppings or just classic?
Oh, man. I make my own marinara.
Love it.
I use San Marzano tomatoes and cook it up nice with some garlic, a little white wine, some olive oil. I might throw just a little bit of Parmesan in there, and a little bit of basil, and let that simmer. And then I'll usually I can make a crust, but I don't make the best crust in the world. So a lot of times I'll buy a dough and make the crust from that. And then I usually just cheese on top, some mozzarella, maybe a little bit of cheddar as well, a little extra flavor.
Love it. Now you're making me hungry.
Man. Yeah, man, I love to cook, man.
Me too.
It's very meditative to me, and plus I think it's nice for the whoever lives in a home where you're smelling cooking going on. I feel like it's going to leave good memories for you.
I agree, and it's meditative. I think it's medicinal. I think it's also it's extremely creative and artistic. It's its own art form in itself, and it's constructive. And I love to eat. So.
Yeah. It's a gift to the people, whoever's around you that gets to eat it. Like they're happy, man. Like they didn't have to cook nothing, and they're getting a good meal. So
music and food are probably the ultimate, universal languages, right?
On that, man, for sure.
I got one last question for you, and I ask everybody this at the end, which is if you could go back in time to your younger self, your 15-year-old self, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him? What would you tell him?
Ooh, do the right thing as much as you can. That's it. Do the right thing as much as you can.
It's great. It's fantastic. We will have in the description box below all of your links. And as soon as the album I'll see if Susan can shoot over like the pre-album, the pre-save.
Yeah, absolutely. She can do that.
Yeah, and we'll have that down below. And for those that are not watching or they're just listening, where can folks find you the best on the internet?
So, I have a website, earlytimes.co, not .com, just .co. And then, I'm on Facebook. I have an Early Times and the High Rollers page. I am on Instagram with the same. I think the tag might be Early Times Band on those, but I don't recall exactly. But I'm easy enough to find. If you look up Early Times and the High Rollers, especially, I'm easy to find. And, I have a YouTube channel, and there I've got, I don't have tons of content, but this year I have started posting some lyric videos for some of my tunes. So if people, have heard any of my stuff on the radio and they're like, what the hell was he talking about in that song? Well, you can read the lyrics and listen to it at the same time. So I am talking with a friend of mine, Jeremy Lanny, who makes films. And he's in the process, pre-production, of trying to put together a new film. He might be using some of my stuff in that, which would always be fun, He made a wonderful video of one of my tunes that you can see. It's on YouTube, but I think the main version of it is on Vimeo. Because I think at the time Vimeo allowed like high definition or whatever it was. I think that's why he originally put it up there. But a song that I did called Pistol Under My Pillow, and I was in this video, and it's really, really a cool video. And I encourage you and your listeners, and I can send you a link to that if you want to put in there. But it's a very cool kind of theatrical video, the kind of videos they don't really make too much. And this guy, Jeremy, just took one of my songs that he heard, and he said, I'm going to write a script for that and make a video. And a few weeks later, I was on a plane to Los Angeles to do it, and it came out really cool.
That's great. Yeah, please send the link, and we'll include it in, or I'll check it out for sure. And that's fantastic. So again, description box below for those of you that are watching. And if you're not on YouTube and you're on iTunes, Spotify, Simplecast, head over to the YouTube channel, click on the show number, and you'll be able to find all that information there if it's not in your listening bio and description of the show itself and the episode itself. So this has been an absolute pleasure. It was so great having you. And any last words before we sign off on the recording?
If whatever you want to do in life, be it music or anything else, just pursue it. And one thing that I believe is, if you can master one thing in your life, I don't care what that thing is, but if you can master it, you'll not only have learned that one thing, but you'll learn how to learn anything you want to learn. There's a process, and as a musician, there's a process of learning. And so I just say, learn how to master something. And from there, man, the world can open up, and you'll never know what might come your way.
Love it. Love it. This has been a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. You guys have been watching and listening to the Jason Damico Show. Check out Early on XM, Sirius XM Bluesville. I believe he's also on Deep Tracks from time to time, and his new record that's going to be coming out that we've talked about, and all the other great pursuits that he has coming up in the works. Catch him at one of his shows, and we will see you all on the next episode. Peace.